A response to some comments here. Simon Evans 8979 says marches are a waste of a good walk, much in the same way that golf is a good walk. Wasted. I entirely agree. I'm not sure whether I agree about the golf. I've never played golf. I remember being at university in St Andrews for a while and running up and down the golf course on the beach, and it it seemed well. I can't comment on golf, but I can comment on a large march like the march today and the march yesterday. I think there's a difference between the two. The march today was a display of solidarity. The march yesterday was also a display of solidarity, and so far, I think it has some effect. Not a great deal of effect, but some. But yesterday was intended to change people's minds. I don't think that's going to work somehow. I think we've gone past that day. I said this a few times, and I know that I know there's also been some comments on here suggesting that I'm being inconsistent. I see no problem with going on a march. I think if you want to go on a march, go on a march. It's a great way to establish camaraderie, unity, and to meet other people who are of a like mind. But I don't think it's the sort of thing that is going to influence government policy or particularly change events. I don't think it's the marches in London which have influenced Netanyahu. Netanyahu is fixed on his own survival. I think what has influenced Netanyahu is the constant poking by the families of the hostages and the constant questioning by them, rightly so, about what he thinks his priorities are, because Netanyahu has been very vague about his priorities. His priorities are to get rid of Hamas. That, I think, is not a priority that he can achieve. And in his bellicosity and his aggression, he has in many ways overlooked the fate of the hostages. This hostage deal, which is going through at the moment, still leaves 80% of the hostages underground, held by Hamas. I don't see that that's anything to celebrate or anything to crow about. The fact that there's even talking now is a great positive, but that could have been happening 7 weeks ago. Instead, 7 weeks ago, rather than assembling an international coalition that was literally poised and waiting for the whistle, Netanyahu has managed to alienate most of the allies that he could have turned to, and indeed most of those Arabic countries who were horrified by the Hamas terrorist event. And I don't see how, even if Netanyahu goes back to attacking the Gaza Strip like a chicken run and making the civilian victims run this way and that, and run the gambit of being accused of an attempted genocide, I don't see how that is something that will restore peace and restore security for Israel. If anything, it ensures continued hostilities for the foreseeable future. And that is not something that any prime minister should be leaving to his successors. The best thing that can happen now in Israel is for Netanyahu to move on. Am I suggesting there should be a general election in Israel? That would be even more chaotic than anything else. I think there has to be some sort of political maneuver and a part-time caretaking government that is anything other than dominated by Likud and the likes of the likes of Netanyahu and Ben Gvir, who are pernicious. And I'm afraid in the process even the language of President Herzog has been tainted and is deplorable. Herzog and Netanyahu must be forced to account for the language they use, because it doesn't reflect the attitudes and the approach of the IDF. Though if you just take the Netanyahu Herzog language and you place that against the horrific death toll in Gaza, then yes, I'm afraid you end up with an Owen Jones conclusion that there has been a genocide. I don't believe there has. I do believe there's been an enormous catastrophe and an enormous loss of life, and a reprehensible loss of life. And I also believe that there are some serious questions to be answered, which may amount to criminal charges. But I don't believe that the word genocide should be used lightly, and certainly not of Israel. I'm less cautious when I look at the terrorist attack on the 7th of October. But Netanyahu must go. He must go. And as for marches, as I say, a display of unity, the bigger the better, I suppose. But I don't think, other than making the marchers feel better and making their friends feel better, a march has any great efficacious value. And I'm sorry about that. But the days of marches are the days of the 20th century and the 19th century. They have been sidelined by legislation and by convention. I think we need to find a new way to protest, a new way to shout. And the idea that we can have a protest which is quiet is simply laughable. Protest, by definition, is to shout. But I think the days of marches, and for that matter the days of petitions, are over. They have been so cleverly trapped by legislation, and by police kettling. They no longer have the impact that they once had.